emergency, but you can have pinpointed phones which are designed for emergency, to make emergency calls rather than everybody being able to make emergency calls. There's actually one of there's actually a requirement of USA law for E991 actually in there as well. So anyways, notifications can be sent via email, chat, and calls to relevant internal security personnel. For example, calls to emergency numbers can bypass the license restrictions. So for example, to allow the calls to go through without any hindrance really. So what it means is, if you have 8 simultaneous calls and all 8 channels are being used on the PBX, if it will go through. Although it is effectively using an existing extra license, 3CX will let it go through. Okay, so if you do need more information on emergency numbers and functionality, there is an actual blog post which I can share on 3CX, or you can just search on 3CX blog post about E911 regulations, which will talk about different elements of the law and how to get around it. Now moving on to the outbound caller ID. The caller ID is the number the PBX sends out to the PSTN network and the receiver of the call sees on their display. 3CX offers 3 ways of manipulating the caller ID. Okay, so the first way is to configure. We've covered that a bit as well, which is in the outbound caller ID bit, but you can also do different ways. So the first way is to configure caller ID that will be used from all extensions when making an outbound call. Now to configure that, this is a default one, right? So to configure that, what you do is you go to SIP trunk and edit your trunk, and there's a field called caller ID, and you can configure your caller ID there. So the second one, you can configure the system so that each extension has a different caller ID when calling out. Now this is extension based, so you effectively go to extensions, general, edit the extension, obviously go to general tab, and there's an all outbound caller ID bit there. You can add your DDI of specific number outbound caller ID there as well. And finally, which I've already spoken about, is you can actually do that based on the route as well. So effectively, you can go to the outbound caller ID, outbound route, and configure the outbound caller ID in the outbound route. Sometimes you may use a SIP trunk provider to call multiple countries, for which you may also have to add some DDIs for those countries. If you have multiple within the outbound rules, you can modify the outbound caller ID going out for a particular call for each individual route of an outbound rule. So any caller ID entered in the outbound rule will override the caller ID defined in extensions or SIP trunk mentioned in part 1 and 2. So this outbound route under outbound rules will override anything you have defined under extensions or under the SIP trunks. So there is a precedence set up here. So the caller ID numbers you will usually need to have, the caller ID needs to have a specific format. These formats can vary from one provider to another, and I would obviously strongly recommend speaking to your provider and asking them what their infrastructure requires. Or you can also look at their documentation when you're registering or buying their service. Some of the common formats are here. You do not add any spaces or dashes when defining caller ID. That just doesn't work. So common format in EU is +449 004949. You can also add 0, which is the local area number, or without the 0, or even the last 6 digits. That's, as I said, depending on how your provider handles the caller ID. Common ones in the US is +1469 149, and vice versa. It's pretty much same, but just different ways of doing that. So again, the most important part is do not use spaces, dashes, or parentheses when you are defining outbound caller ID. Finally, the last topic before actually I do the demonstration is to recognize some of the most common issues related to SIP trunk. If you ever notice that incoming or outgoing calls work but drop after 32 seconds, which is the most commonly ones I have seen, or there may be one-way audio. So especially when the external party can hear a user on the system, but the user of the system which is the 3CX user, cannot hear the external party, and this is most likely means that your firewall hasn't been configured correctly. So double check the firewall has been test has been passed, and most importantly, SIP-ALG has been disabled on your firewall. Also check if your public IP address has changed from what it was when you entered during the initial setup of the system. An incorrect public IP address will cause the provider to attempt communication with the wrong public IP address, which basically means the provider will be sending or is sending the audio to probably a wrong IP address, which obviously doesn't work. So this is most commonly happen when your organization or when your customer organization have multiple IP addresses and they have allocated a public IP address for your PBX, but maybe when it comes to routing, they've not been able to route it correctly. So when the call is going out, the public IP address changing is changed to something else, which basically means it's gonna cause all sorts of different problems. So that's it from SIP trunk configuration. Let's look at an actual demonstration of how it can be configured. So let me bring my 3CX PBX up. So just bear with me 1 second while I'm doing that. Apologies for the delay. I'm just trying to move my screen around, so just bear with me 1 second. Right, okay, there now. Okay, so now you can see one of my hosted PBX in the cloud, which I am going to be using to configure a SIP trunk. Pretty much straightforward, as I have covered before. I'm going to be using a SIP gate SIP trunk, which is unfortunately not a certified one, but it still works, just to give you an idea of how easy it is to set up. So effectively, the simple thing is you go to SIP trunks. I've already have some, I have an SBC connected and I've got some other bits and bobs, but ignore that. Any simple options, but effectively, just to give you an idea, SIP trunk is where you add an actual SIP trunk. If you have a gateway, a local PSTN gateway, you use the add gateway bit. If you're adding a PBX for SBC, click on add SBC, and then if you're connecting two 3CX PBX together, you use the add bridge option. Okay, so now I'm going to be adding a SIP trunk, so I'm going to click on add. You can see select a country option there. So in there you can see different things. You can go the generic one, but if I just click on UK, I'm just going to give you an idea of what it looks like. So if I click on select the UK country, and if I click on the drop-down menu, these are all the different effectively supported providers in the UK at the moment. If you are one of the SIP providers and you want to be certified, you will probably have to, well, not probably, you will have to speak to 3CX, and your name can potentially appear in there as well. But again, some of them are Vodafone, VoiceFlex, Gamma, Fuse2, BT Wholesale, Brightstar. So these are different providers. Now, as I said, I'm going to be using a generic one. So I'm just going to use a generic one. It's not Asterix, it's a generic SIP trunk. So my number is, I'm just going to use my number here. So just bear with me 1 second, please. I've got the SIP details on a different page, so I'm just going to copy and paste a lot of stuff. But my main number is this. Again, this is how SIP trunk obviously gives me the number. E0 is just the authentication name, so I'm just going to keep it simple. Press OK, and then it opens that extra field. And in there, I know that SIP gate. Let's call it K. Nothing else is needed up there, but I am using a registered SIP account, based account. So press on OK. Then again, enter the same ID and enter the password. My SIP trunk number is the same. Obviously, as I said, you can configure different things. I'm going to be sending it to an extension, which is here. I've got it configured at the moment. I'm just going to do the same thing for the second one as well, so it doesn't bring anything else, just to be on the safe side. DDI, I don't have a DDI, I just have one main number, so I'm going to stick with that one and then press OK. Now at the moment it is obviously red, but hopefully if I refresh it in a couple of seconds, it should go green. And that's pretty much to it. Sometimes you do have to mess around with some of the fields. Now I do have to create an inbound rule because obviously the calls won't work without creating an inbound rule. So I can go here, I can select the DDI I've got here, and then I can select again, do the same thing here. So I can send it to 1-1. This is probably you will have to do when you're creating, obviously when you have multiple DDIs in there. So press OK, and all being well, I'm just going to give you a live example of whether it will work, whether it works or not. So I'm just dialing the number. My number is 01422893872. Okay, so I'm just dialing the number now, and you can probably hear my phone is ringing. So although it is not a supported endpoint, it still works. You know, I've got it working, so it still works. There isn't any problem with it. But again, the main problem is when you do actually use a non-certified SIP trunks. If you have a problem, you're kind of stuck. You have to go to either the provider, or maybe you can come to ProView as well, and we can try and help. But again, if you do have multiple DDIs from the provider, what you have to do is go to the SIP trunks, edit the SIP trunk here, add all the DDIs here. So you can add single DDI. I'm just going to make up some numbers. Obviously I don't have a DDI, but I can make up numbers like this, or I can do something like *83873, so I don't have to remember, you know, to keep on adding that number. So there are different ways you can do that. The other things you can do as well, which is called, as I said, caller ID. Again, this is covered more in advanced training course. You do have the options on supporting different things. So if you, it's not really part of the training course, but I'm just going to cover that option, call options. You can allow inbound calls, outbound calls. For some reason, if you do have a SIP trunk for different SIP trunk for inbound, different SIP trunk for outbound, this is where you can create those options or disable or enable them. PBX deliver audio is probably the best one. You can also, if your SIP trunk supports encryption, which is a SIP, SRTP and TLS, this is what you will have to do to change it. So you can you can change it to TLS, then you can start looking at uploading of certificates and all sorts of stuff. So it can get very, very tricky if you do look at TLS. But again, if you're using a certified SIP trunk, they will provide you with a guide, or when you're creating the generic SIP or SIP trunk anyways, it will create all the templates for you. So it's pretty much straightforward in that. And there's obviously other bits and bobs as well, which is inbound route and which part of the packet it uses to create inbound rules and send the calls to. So sometimes you do have to make those changes effective anyways. So that's creating of a SIP trunk. Then you have inbound rules. As I said, you can create, I've created an inbound rule to do, you know, send it to my extensions. I can also send it to a different place if I want to. I can also set up a different specific hours for this trunk to follow. So I can say on Monday between 8 and 17 p.m. you know, configure this. Only use of this. These are my office hours. So after anything else, it should go to somewhere else. You know, these are my office hours. So maybe factory actually. Let's say give it an example. No, I shouldn't be working that late. From 8 to. It's not letting me change once because I've changed it now. Okay, let's try again. So you have to delete it and start again. So effectively, if I do, I'm only working from 8 till 12 o'clock. Then these will come into action. So basically, it will use that as my specific hours, working hours. This is typically useful for people when they're working from a part-time basis and vice versa. Anything out of these hours will be considered as out of hours, and that's where this destination bit will kick in. So that's pretty much inbound rules, and then we have outbound rules. Again, I've covered that anyways, but again, it's pretty much I've already have an extension which is I've got a link to our main PBX configured on it. So basically, effectively on our PBX we have a four-digit length. So effectively, I'm just going to give you a bad idea. So all the extension numbers we have starts with 5. So what it means, this kind of effectively rule is doing is if the numbers will start with 5 and followed by a 4-digit number, which is a four-digit extension, send it to my asterisk PBX. I don't want it to strip down or anything like that. I just want to send it to that thing. So that's pretty much simple. But also I can create a new rule, and I can just say outbound calls 0 to 9, or I can just say 0 to 9. If call comes in, you can also block calls and you can generic SIP. I don't want to strip down numbers. I don't want to prepend anything. But if you do want to do strip down numbers, for example, if the incoming call, the caller is adding +44, I can say I want to strip down, plus 1 digit. Actually, no, 2 digits. Is it 2? 3. So if I want to strip down the first 3 digits, so let's say, for example, if the user is dialing +44, but your SIP trunk doesn't understand +44 element, and they want you to send you as 0 or 2 or 7 or vice versa. So what you do is strip the first 3 digits and prepend it with 0. Okay, and that's what will happen is if somebody is dialing +441484840044, it will change it to 04414845044, whatever the number is. Okay, and that's pretty much it to it. Again, you can make that outbound rule specific for extensions. So if I want to only make it for 101, I can just say it's only 101 or 102 can do it. If I want calls to numbers with a certain length, then I can do that as well. I can also add a rule based on extension groups. And again, we're not covering the extension groups in this module, but you can create rules based on users or extension groups or these groups on the PBX. Okay, so that's about it from the SIP trunking side of it. I'm just going to quickly have a look and see if there is any relevant question to this one. So there is a question about, do you have a diagram that shows how SIP trunks and PBX come in action all together? Unfortunately, I don't really have any diagrams. I'm not really sure what the question is, to be honest. So what I will do is, off the call, if we can have a chat about it, so I can probably try and explain how SIP trunks work with 3.6 PBX. Okay, there's another question which is off the topic, but I'm going to cover that anyway. So there's a question about what is the difference between WebRTC and US Csta. Quite a few differences, but WebRTC is used for audio and video kind of in simple words. Obviously, I'm not going to go into any technicalities of it, but WebRTC is a protocol used for browsers where the browsers can do or host an audio video call. So you don't need any third-party add-on to be installed. So the browser can act as an audio source and a actual destination as well. Whereas US Csta is mainly used for passing the message across, if that's the easiest way I can think of. So effectively, it allows you to integrate your IP phone. So what happens is, if you want to make a dial number from your web browser to an IP phone, then you can use the web. You can send it on. You can select the destination on the browser, like I showed yesterday, where you can select T46S. And then when you dial number, it sends it in the US Csta format. So the phone understands it and it dials out from the phone. I don't know, this is the more simplest way I can think of, but if you do need a bit more detailed information, please come and speak to me and I'll try and explain that to you. Okay. Right, okay, so that's covers first part of the training course. So let's move on to the next module, which is the voicemail. So voicemail is pretty much simple enough for everybody to use. It is effectively a voicemail of the PBX. It's not rocket science, to be honest, but again, there's a module on it from 3CX, which is effectively